really antsy about singing this song.
I'm really antsy about singing this song right across the street from the temple that is the target of the song. This is the Angelus Temple. And for today's sermon on evil, I want you to learn just a little about the woman who called herself Sister Aimee. I'll have about 5 pages of remarks and then a song. The chorus of the song we should be practicing first, however. It goes like this. A hidey, 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 hi. You say, a hidey, 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 hi. A hody, 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 ho. A hody, 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 ho. Okay, that wasn't so good. We'll be practicing it more times in the future. The lesson today about evil is not about any evil that Aimee did, if any, but rather about the evil done to her, and by extension, all those who would continue to look up to her, including all the people who go to this temple every day, and especially on Sunday. The composer of this song basically attempted character assassination. That's what we're talking about, folks. That's the evil for today's lecture. Trailblazing, flamboyant, enormously successful, and politically powerful LA radio evangelist Aimee Semple McPherson, who, and this is just sort of a brief overview of her resume, who led Pentecostalism's advance from the margins of Protestantism to the mainstream of American culture, whose celebrity status, use of spectacle, and mass media savvy came to define modern evangelicalism, whose integration of politics with faith set precedents for the religious right, and on whose career Sinclair Lewis loosely based the deeply hypocritical vamp in his 1927 novel Elmer Gantry, which was therefore denounced by many religious leaders and banned in some U.S. cities. All that fuss over Aimee Semple McPherson. I learned this song from Pete Seeger when I was like 50 years ago, whose folklorist source in turn attributed the song to an anonymous hobo from the 1930s, which was when the big scandal erupted over Aimee, and we're about to hear about that in a few minutes. The moral of the song purports to be simply that a divorced lady preacher enjoying a tryst with a married man risked not only scandal but also imprisonment and immortal infamy in song for thus having turned to a life of crime. That's the song. But folks, the song is wrong. Okay, let's practice Heidi, hi, hi again. Heidi, 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 hi. Heidi, 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 hi. Hody, 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 ho. Hody, 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 ho. Much better. You'll have at least 5 more opportunities. Well before the 1930s, Aimee had lots of other enemies already, politically and religiously, many of whom would have been pleased at how the song unfairly skewers her. One of those enemies was Upton Sinclair, the Democratic Party nominee for governor of California in 1934, whose campaign was defeated decisively. Perhaps the motivation to compose this song was the composer's payback for Aimee's prominent role in the defeat of that bid by Upton Sinclair to be elected governor. In fact, what if the anonymous composer, the hobo, so-called, was the muckraker himself to get that payback? No one will ever know. Aimee began broadcasting on radio in the early 1920s, before she built the Angelus Temple. She was one of the first women to preach a radio sermon. With the opening of Foursquare Gospel-owned KFSG, a year after the Angelus Temple opened, she became only the second woman granted a broadcast license by the United States. So although her political position was anti-evolution, pro-blue law, very, very conservative. I don't think, I bet there are very few people in this crowd who agree with her politically. She actually was almost the epitome of what a powerful woman can achieve in a society that hasn't yet recognized women as having an equal voice. You might say that Amy's voice was equal, or perhaps even more equal than others. Here, at this spot, at this temple, Aimee gave up to 22 sermons a week. And the lavish Sunday night service attracted the largest crowds. Extra trolleys and police were needed out right here to help route the traffic through Echo Park to and from the Angelus Temple here. And to finance the Angelus Temple and its projects, collections were taken at every meeting. In other words, sending the collection plate through the audience. And often with Amy's admonition, "Let not the ears of the Lord be offended by the clinking of coins. Let him hear only the rustle of paper." Even in these early days of her fame, Aimee often received hostile letters and death threats. An alleged plot to kidnap her, detailed in the Los Angeles Times, was foiled in September of 1925. Almost a year after that kidnapping attempt, or about 3 years after the temple was, the Angelus Temple was opened, Aimee disappeared, swimming off of Ocean Park Beach, which is just north of Venice Beach, wearing a bathing suit. And she did not reappear until over a month later in Mexico, wearing a dress and a wristwatch that she hadn't worn to the beach, and claiming that she had escaped kidnappers holding her for ransom. Well, at the tent meeting that had been conducted by her mother the night of her disappearance, Amy's mother had preached as if she feared Aimee had drowned, because she was swimming, after all, in the ocean. And before she reappeared, there was such a massive search for her corpse that 2 people themselves died in the search. I mean, that's how serious it was. She was probably one of the biggest celebrities in the Western world at the time. To this day, no one knows what, instead of drowning, really happened to Aimee Semple McPherson. It is one of the great unsolved mysteries in American history. And I don't know if you guys realize, but she had 2 children, and the last of them, I think, just died a few years ago. So I don't think we're going to find out. Unless there's some confidant who learned from her what really happened, or maybe the kidnapping story is true. But there never was a full government investigation into her kidnapping story. The Los Angeles Examiner offered $10,000 for information about the kidnappers, and $1,000 if anyone could locate the shack in Mexico where Aimee was allegedly kept. However, the police seemed to have no interest in trying to find the kidnappers. A grand jury investigation commenced, focusing instead on Amy's personal life. When Aimee was 28, or 8 years before her disappearance, Mr. McPherson, the one whose name she used, had separated from Aimee and her 2 daughters, and he divorced her 3 years after that. Some people came up with the idea that when Aimee went missing, it was in order to conduct an affair with the married engineer of radio KFSG, who had left his job there some months earlier. When Aimee and her mother were not forthcoming with answers to the grand jury regarding Aimee's relationship with the radio engineer, the judge in that inquiry charged them with obstruction of justice, charges which then duly went to trial. So if you ever get called before the grand jury, this should be a lesson to you. You don't play around with grand juries if you don't want to be the target of an obstruction of justice charge. If nothing else, that made this whole performance worthwhile to you. When Aimee and her mother were not, I already told you that, confronted with documentary and eyewitness evidence at the trial that while Aimee was missing, he indeed was having an extramarital affair in Carmel with an unidentified woman, the radio engineer belatedly admitted to that, but he denied that Aimee was his new flame. His denial was never disproved, and the district attorney dropped all charges against Aimee and her mother for lack of evidence. Her success at her trial did not end the bad newspaper publicity from her disappearance, however. Elmer Gantry was published the next year, indirectly supporting the views of Amy's political and religious enemies. At the time, many people believed that Amy's latest kidnapping story was just one big publicity stunt. To combat these attacks, Amy spoke freely about her legal troubles on the air from Radio KFSG, right here. And she likened herself to Joan of Arc, claiming that the forces of evil were trying to sacrifice a woman preacher. Just like in the 15th century, men were threatened by a powerful, unmarried woman who challenged the status quo. So whose side are you on here? Yeah. Contrary to the song that I'm about to sing you, Amy was not convicted of anything or even ever jailed. And nor was her former radio engineer ever on the lam trying to escape from the authorities. The song is wrong. Even worse, I performed the song for 5 decades without questioning its lies. I'm sorry, Amy. Only by performing the song for the big parade right here in front of Amy's Angelus Temple did I finally become motivated to do a little fact-checking. And I found out the song is wrong. After I learned the truth, I nevertheless performed it once again for the big parade because I thought the most inaccurate parts of the lyrics could be edited as if by publicly acknowledging those lies, I might continue to include the song in my repertoire. It does have some nice, naughty lyrics. And a really great chorus which goes, Heidi, 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 hi. Hody, 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 ho. Much better. But I've since come to feel, Amy, that the evil of the song's lyrics is too great to justify my trying to salvage them. Whether or not I've succeeded today in teaching you anything about that evil, I expect this will be my last public performance of the song. Of course, the moral of the actual scandal may depend on whom you now believe. If you are inclined not to believe both Amy and her radio engineer, then the moral is that back in the 1920s, with a good enough lawyer, a divorced lady preacher and a married man could get away with keeping the details of their affair confidential despite litigation over their lying about it to a grand jury. Big deal. We've seen it happen before, and it will happen again. Neither of those morals appeals to me personally, however, and neither would justify my singing the song to you today. So forgive me, Amy, while I drag out this evil song one last time, in hopes that despite its unfair, insidious presumptions and distortions, along with outright falsehoods, you'll find some redeeming social value in the lessons taught by the song's persistence as an urban myth, like a satire. From my point of view, one possible moral is that, and I'm quoting Mencken, who was a big enemy of, a contemporary of Amy's, but a big enemy of hers, for every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. Another possible moral is, if you want to discredit somebody's political agenda, then go after their private life, which is in fact, well, how it's done these days, but it was still somewhat new at the time, at Amy's time. It hadn't been quite developed into the art it is now. But my favorite moral, which I'm going to disclose to you in hopes that you remember it if you don't remember anything else I've said today, is a whale stuck in shallow water incurs the wrath of minnows. That's what this song is really about. So let's try our Heidi Highs again. Heidi, 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 hi. Hody, 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 ho. Hody, 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 ho. Have you heard the story about Aimee McPherson? Aimee McPherson, that wonderful person. She weighed 180 and her hair was red, and she reached a wicked sermon, so the papers all said, Heidi, 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 hi. Heidi, Heidi, Hody, 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 ho. herself a radio station to broadcast her preaching to the nation. She found a man named Armanstadt who knew enough to run the radio while Aimee did her stuff. Heidi, 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 Heidi. They had a tent meeting down at Ocean Park. They preached from early morn until after dark. They said the benediction and they folded up the tents, but then nobody knew where Aimee went. Heidi, 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 Holy, holy, holy. When Aimee McPherson got back from her journey, she told a little story to the district attorney. She said she'd been kidnapped on a lonely trail, and in spite of a lot of questions, she stuck to her tail. Heidi, 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 holy, holy, holy. Well, the grand jury held an investigation, uncovered a lot of spicy information, found out about a love nest down at Carmel by the sea, where the liquor was expensive and the lovin' was free. Heidi, 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 holy, 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 holy. Found out about a cottage with a breakfast nook, a folding bed with a worn-out look. The slats was busted and the springs was loose, and the dents in the mattress fitted Aimee's caboose. Heidi, 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 holy, 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 holy. Well, Radio Ray is a going hound, going yet, and he ain't been found. They got a description, but they got it too late. But since they got it, he's lost a lot of weight. Heidi, 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 holy, 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 holy. I'll end my story in the usual way about a lady preacher's holiday. If you don't get the moral, then you're the girl for me, 'cause there are plenty of cottages still at Carmel by the sea. Heidi, 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 holy, 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 holy.
Everything else is good? Wait, I want it.
Oh, you want it?
He doesn't want me to say. He doesn't want me to say thank you to him.
You're going to have to turn on the mic.
So you guys can tell that Andrew was racked and riddled with guilt about this song. So I want to say thank you. I told him that if he told the story of why he wasn't going to perform the song, it would be better than just not performing the song. And I think he told a great story. And so I want to say thanks. And I hope next year we'll be able to cajole and browbeat and intimidate him and bully him again into performing it. But I think it's unlikely. We're now going to head up towards Chango Coffee Shop. So this is the end of the morning loop. I've already given instructions on getting back. We're going to be crossing Sunset Boulevard. So when we do that, Bob, if you could help get people across the street.